All right, everyone, we've got to talk about the relaxing of the Johnson Amendment, which is not always carried through with anyway. Like, if you go to a church and it's a particularly religious church, I'm not talking about like your local like, Unitarian congregation or something, there will be some political talk within the church. I remember back when I was a Christian, it was made fairly clear from the pulpit, yeah, Bush is the more religious candidate over Kerry at the time. Without, actually telling the congregation, oh, here's who you should vote for. They would just say, oh, well, I think this is more biblical, or they would talk only positively about one person and then just sort of browbeat the other, which technically doesn't violate the Johnson Amendment. It happens all the time in pulpits across the country. I personally do not have a problem with churches with like a pastor or a priest or whatever rambling about politics to their congregation for several reasons. First, those are still private individuals. Secondly, I do not believe that that specifically violates the church and state. Political speech or advocacy on that level should not be considered improper for a religious individual. And that, by the way, this doesn't just include, for those people on the left that are the ones primarily complaining about this, that doesn't just mean that some fire and brimstone far-right preacher can say, oh yeah, we need to vote for this candidate so we can ban sodomy or something like that. That means that your very likely liberal Catholic priest or something like that can also weigh in. It would mean somebody who leads like a pagan congregation, an Islamist, which I'm sure the left is very happy about, because then they can take that Saudi money and use it to distribute leaflets or something for the person that they want elected. So I'm not sure this is a great idea for the country as a whole on policy issues. But as far as what's the constitutional argument, I'm sorry, but the concept of separating the church and state prevents a church from establishing theocratic or quasi-theocratic trappings, and it prevents Congress from, attacking religious institutions at the same time. It doesn't mean that a private individual who happens to be giving a sermon shouldn't be able to at least lightly weigh in on politics. But this goes further than that. And that's where it's more of a double-edged sword for me. It also goes to the ACA's mandate regarding contraception coverage, things of that nature. Now, I would think if you're going to mandate that businesses cover contraception, there should be no exemption given. But what I would say is you should simply get rid of the ACA. Employers should be able to determine what that covered. That's a service that they are offering to people, potentially. Why should an employer be forced in the first place to offer insurance to its employees? It's a private business entity. The free market, quite literally, will take care of this if there were a free market to actually exist in the first place, because people would tend to gravitate towards businesses that will not mistreat them. The concept of contraception coverage is additionally murky when you come to think of the fact that you're essentially talking about the female population deriving direct benefit from that, while the male population is not necessarily getting that. And I'm not some anti-Planned Parenthood Bible thumper. On that issue, I would side generally with the left. I don't have a problem with abortion. Contraception is a good thing, not an immoral thing, not a bad thing. I'm very much in support of it. But to force an employer to cover it in the first place is a little odd, especially if you're going to give an exemption, like Trump wants to, just to religious corporations or religious businesses or something like that. Couldn't any Tom, Dick, or Harry with a business who doesn't want to have to deal with that fucking shit claim that exemption? Just say, well, yeah, I converted to Christianity recently, and I shouldn't be forced to do this. It's going to cause a major legal problem, and I'm not sure that it's a legal problem that we really need to drag through the judiciary all over again. We already had to go through, oh, is the ACA constitutional to begin with? Now we're setting ourselves up for another protracted legal battle. It just seems a little bit odd to me. And then you have the concept of churches participating in more direct advocacy under the auspices of what Trump is doing here with rescinding parts of the Johnson Amendment. Essentially, I think a proper thing to do would be that religious edifices should be classed as businesses and taxed, and they should be able to do whatever the hell they want politically. That's what I think should happen. All of these holdings by these churches, a church owns some apartment building, doesn't even get properly taxed. It's like, oh yeah, it's a religious structure because we're the ones who own it. The Pope says it's holy, or something like St. Joseph walked here at one point, and so we shouldn't have to pay taxes on it. I think that that's nonsense. The concept that taxing the church separates the church and state is also strange to me. Because it clearly doesn't. It's simply it's a property holding. To say, well, I'm religious, I have the right to say what I want, I can preach on the street or whatever. Yeah, of course you can. But does that actually extend to, yes, indeed, at the same time, we shouldn't even be taxed on structures that we happen to own, even if they are potentially profiting us as what essentially boils down to a business entity, whether it's in the form of like tithes and donations and more of the strictly like, old-timey church religious side, or whether it's an actual like business or something, or a firm that raises money, solicits it directly for religious causes, whether they're charitable or not. I think I have a slight problem with that. But if you're not going to open up the church, or the churches rather, and mosques and synagogues and so forth to taxation, then they shouldn't be participating in direct political advocacy. They're not paying anything into the pot, therefore they don't really have any stake in the game when it comes to political outcomes. But to penalize a church leader, an individual, for weighing in on politics, I think is clearly wrong. I don't have any problem with that. Again, it's not just some fire and brimstone Baptist, it's also the Catholic and the Pentecostal and the Unitarian, it's the Shia Muslim, the Sunni Muslim, the Jew, and so forth. It's certainly the atheist. Anyone should be able to weigh in on these things. They shouldn't face any form of repercussions for having their beliefs, making their beliefs known. And as long as they can claim, well, I'm allowed to have political beliefs, I also have religious beliefs. Yes, I'm standing up in front of the congregation. I'm not forcing them to listen to my own political opinions. And if I'm wrapping them up in religious language, so be it. Who cares? I don't care. There was a time many years ago when I might have cared and said, oh, well, that's wrong. I don't care anymore. Because I don't you're fundamentally suppressing their First Amendment rights too, in a way. Beyond just the religious, in the sense of also free expression when you do that. I think that it's great to temper the Johnson Amendment. What's not clear here is this going to cause a prolonged legal battle over contraception? I think it will. I think that's a bad thing, generally speaking. Whether you agree with the premise or not, okay, maybe so. But is it a battle worth having? Is the benefit going to outweigh the cost to the nation in terms of social alienation? I'm not entirely sure that it will. As far as direct advocacy, you need to open up these edifices to being taxed if they're going to participate in very direct political discourse. If it's just a pastor or a priest or an imam or something saying, oh yeah, this candidate's better than the other based on some dogma, who cares? I don't care. And that goes, again, as far as the contraception part and abortion, things like that, again, I support these things. But do I care that religious charity has to or does not have to pay into such a system? I'm not sure that I do. And I might be hypocritical if I did care because, of course, I don't have health insurance, don't want to be bothered with it, and until it's fully reformed, stable, and capable of being affordable, I won't bother with it. And for other people within my age demographic, there are a hell of a lot of people who feel the same. It's just more trouble than it's worth. That's about all. Peace out.